from our July commission meeting and then the special called meeting on August the 7th. Do any commissioners have comments or questions about these?
I'm going to approve.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Right. I've been advised by the executive director we can take numbers 3 through 6 together. We have an event permit. We have a promoter's license application, an event permit from that same promoter, and then an event permit for NFC on October the 5th. Any commissioners have comments or questions on any of these or wish to separate them out and take them individually? All right, Matt, everything is in order. I think this promoter's license application and the event permit is for a new promoter that's working with Terry Moss and some stuff, so that's correct. All right, do I hear a motion on 3, 4, 5, and 6?
Move to approve.
Got a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, or is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Those are all approved. Right. Number 7, we have the request for approval of Continental Championship Wrestling license application. This is an issue that we discussed on the special call meeting on August the 7th. Matt, can you give us an update on what has happened with that promoter since our meeting August the 7th?
Sure. So August 7th, we tabled this application. They were scheduled to have a show on the 11th. Speaking with Dennis Gale, they did not have that show. They canceled it. They took all the flyers down off of Facebook and everywhere they were marketing and did not have the show. So that's really all we have. We're here today to see if we want to approve, deny, table again. I don't know what the board may want to do today, but as far as the 11th, that show did not take place.
Okay. And based on my recollection, the conversation on the 7th was around the issue of non-compliance previously. Rick, I believe
Rick was on the table motion.
you were the one who made the motion to table. We have at least some modicum of compliance, it looks like, since the promoter canceled the show without an approved license. We have been advised by our attorney that if we take action on this, the statute pretty much requires that we approve the license application. So with that, I'll throw it out and see if anybody has comments or questions from our commissioners first.
And Matt, the application is in order. Is that correct?
It is. Everything is in order. Everything is completed on the application. So it's, you know, in standard policies, we just approve wrestling license applications pending they are complete. This one was a special case because there was a cease and desist tied to it. But standard, you know, policy is we just approve these pending they are complete applications.
And you have the fee and everything?
We do, yep.
I'll move to approve since we have no other recourse but to move to approve. So I'll go ahead and move to approve.
All right, we have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
A second.
All right, is there any further discussion from commissioners? Right. I suspect there's probably some public comment on this one. I will open it up for brief public comment if there is on this particular issue.
Good morning, this is Chief Cooper.
Morning, Chief Cooper. How are you this morning?
I'm calling in because y'all kind of asked me to, as far as maybe happen in the future with some insight on laws and this and that. And I spoke to the district attorney's office, and I've just been reading some of the laws, and I know that the attorney there was going to review the laws on what y'all's actual authority is, and looking at 43-4B-21, kinda looks like an area that y'all could do stuff civilly for issues like this now or in the future, to keep people that's been not in compliance with y'all as far as civilly, and of course legally, criminally, that would be jurisdictional areas also. So I'm trying to get some insight from y'all as to what direction y'all want to go in this matter and future matters where we have somebody that's been out of compliance for so long and then, you know, doesn't turn in anything until after they get a cease and desist. It's just kind of mind-boggling to me, because we have people come to town every day that has to get a business license, just go door to door to like students and stuff. So, you know, I just look at somebody that's done it for so long without. I mean, the fee is minimal and the application process is minimal. So I just kind of want y'all's insight as to what direction y'all want to go, so that I can work with the district attorney's office on these statutes and see what kind of authority y'all looking at. I know y'all not wanting to regulate and restrict people from being this, because, you know, it's all about, you know, newcomers and business and prosperity of this country. But, you know, I think everybody should follow the rules and do it like they're supposed to.
Well, Chief, I don't know, and I know you're busy, and I appreciate you taking the time to be with us. I don't know that it's really an issue of what we want. It's a question of what we're allowed to do and or required to do under the statute. And I think I mentioned it previously. We've got the study committee coming up where I think we're probably going to talk through some of these very issues and address what we do now, what we want to be able to do in the future, and what we're able to do. Reagan, do you have anything further to add on this?
I don't have anything further. The commission did take action in the fact that it did send a voluntary cease and desist order to Mr. Gale. He did, the commission acted upon that very promptly. Based upon that cease and desist order, it sounds like he then ceased and desist and did not move forward with his event. So we are where we are at this moment in time. I think that's the question on the table, is the application itself, and I think if it's in order, then it's going to have to be approved.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Reagan. Any other comments or questions from commissioners for our attorney or for the chief?
The only question, the code section that he's falling under that y'all have to approve the application, what code section is that? That's the only question I have.
Okay. Reagan, do you have that off the top of your head?
I think it's going to be, it's going to be in Title 43, Chapter 4B, and it provides authority for the board to license promoters. There's just different statutes that requires.
Yeah, there's a ton of them.
Yeah, so.
Have you looked at the 43-4B-21 as far as injunctions, penalties, and whatnot?
Right, yeah, that does say that it's possible to get a court order to enjoin someone who's going to break the statute. And so, you know,
But
if that were to occur in the future, then that would be something that we would need to look at.
and I think if we had sent the cease and desist, and I want to wrap this up because we've got several other things to get into, but I think if we had sent the cease and desist, and for example, if the promoter in question had proceeded with the event on the 11th, that would have moved us into a posture where we would want to be looking at further action. But in my mind, without statutory authority or direction to do something further under what we're allowed to do as a commission, he is in compliance. And so we have to respond accordingly the way the statute is laid out. And I think I mentioned this before, Chief, as we go through this study committee process, I hope you will be able to join us or work with the commission or maybe come to some of the meetings. And if this is something that needs to be addressed statutorily to give us more authority or ability to pursue these types of situations, we certainly would welcome that. We'd want to include you in that conversation so we can recommend those changes to the legislature for the future.
And this is all new to me also, so.
Well, I think it is to us, in some regard too, obviously, the statute is much more prescriptive, with, mixed martial arts and boxing, than it is with, wrestling. So, we'll look forward to continuing that conversation with you, and I appreciate you taking the time to be with us.
Thank y'all.
All right, so we have a motion to approve, we have a second. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Those opposed, like sign. All right. Moving on to number 8, we have been in an extended process that really kind of started last year to update our physical form that fighters fill out. We pretty much had it where we wanted it last month. There were a couple of minor adjustments relating specifically to the question that's asked about concussions. Matt has made, I think, those adjustments. Hey, good morning. Who just joined us? Okay.
I think that was somebody leaving.
Oh, okay.
Dr. Young, you still on the phone as well?
I am.
Alright, we still got our quorum done.
Excellent. Matt has updated the form, and I think the only thing we wanted to add was on the line where we're asking about concussions.
Well, so we added question number 3, have you ever had a concussion? That was one question we wanted added. And then with question 4, we added, have you ever had a TKO/TKO and or lost consciousness? Those were 2 things that we wanted added last month, so we've added those to questions 3 and 4. Like I said, I worked with Dr. Traub and Dr. Malik on this to help them understand the fighters better than the physical we currently have, where everyone just circles no to every answer. And these are the questions that they agree that this will be helpful for them to help understand the fighters better, knowing after the fight they can look at this and help suspensions or anything like that. So this was stuff that they had recommended as well.
All right. Do we need to take action on this?
Do we have to post this, or are we moving to approve the new application?
This
I think
is
we
just a
should.
form.
Yeah, it's just a form. I mean, you can approve it if you like. I don't know if everyone's seen it, but if you're comfortable with it, you can go ahead and authorize Matt to use it.
I'm comfortable with it. Well, let's just go ahead and do it just to check the box. I guess we would need a motion to authorize Matt to use this as the new physical form in the future.
And does the form have a revision date on it?
No, I can put that at the bottom.
Yes, let's just put one as 8/2018, just so we know in the future, or other commissioners in the future know the last time it was revised. And I'll move to authorize the form.
All right, we got a motion. I'll second it. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Excellent, good deal. All right, number 9. We're going to go into a discussion on Chris Arnold's no-show from August the 11th. Matt, I'm going to ask you to give us like a 30-second recap. We've got so many of these things going on, I can't remember which one is which.
So this is a new one.
Okay.
Chris Arnold was scheduled to fight last Saturday night for David Oblis. He came to the weigh-in, he made weight, and then fight night, he did not show up at the scheduled 5 o'clock arrival. I believe David and Jesse Wabel both tried to reach out to him. I tried to call him as well. His phone was turned off. I believe he told David at right around 5 o'clock or so, that he had drank some bad milk and wasn't feeling well. Was going to attempt to come to the fights, but he wasn't sure, and then he just kind of went MIA and never responded to anyone's messages, phone calls, or anything. And one of his teammates was there and had no idea that he felt bad. They had been texting probably an hour before. He had reached out to David and was saying, can you bring gauze and tape to wrap my hands? So it's just, an interesting no-show that he just kind of told him he wasn't feeling well. It was an amateur fight.
Amateur.
And then just completely went MIA.
Is Mr. Arnold here today?
He is not. We did send a notice to appear letter, basically just a standard one that I have when we have cases like this, to let him know that the board's gonna have a discussion about you not showing up. We sent it via email to him, due to the short time leading up to this meeting. He did not respond to that email, so he is not here today.
Well, if he's an amateur, not much we can do, is it?
He holds a license though.
He does hold a license, that's true. When is his license up for renewal?
He just renewed it, so it won't expire till June of 19.
Well, I think we just need to, go forward with the, at the next monthly meeting, if that's enough time, to go ahead and just proceed. Because I don't think we can proceed today. I think we're just talking about whether or not what we want to do. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to see if the board wanted to take further action or anything, so that's what this is today, just to give a breakdown of what happened and see kind of what the commission wants to do.
Yeah, I definitely want to address this in an official manner.
Yeah, and typically, Mr. Reagan, what you normally would do, the offer is usually extended to the fighter to come, like here today, and explain the situation and see if
In a non-public hearing
that,
Correct.
see if
setting.
that clears up the matter or not. And then, but if it often happens, like today, there's nobody here, then usually the procedure that the board votes is commission votes, to send it to me to schedule, to do up a matters asserted and a notice of a hearing. And we'll try to get it set for next month's meeting if we have enough time.
Okay.
If not,
At the appropriate time, Mr. Chairman, I'll move to have the AG's office begin the APA process.
All right, I think now is the appropriate time. We've got a motion. Is there a second? I'll second it. Got a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Okay. Before we move on to the next item, Rick and Dr. Young, I've been here, 2 years, I guess, close to 2 years. It feels like we're seeing more no-show issues than I remember seeing previously, and I don't know if this was maybe an issue that was more prevalent before I got here.
I don't think so. I think you're absolutely spot on, Mr. Chairman, that this is becoming a regular thing, it seems like.
So I'm gonna suggest two things. One, and we can add this for discussion at the end during Commissioner's report. Discuss sending a communication to all of our licensed fighters in Georgia. I don't know if it's an email or a letter or something like that, just saying, hey, look, guys, Commission wants to let you know we're starting to see a lot more of these things. We've got a no tolerance policy for this. Just to let folks know, hey, if you've got a mind to no show, and the promoter decides to bring it to the commission, we're gonna take action on it. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, I think we add that as a topic for the study committee, is there a better way to provide relief both for promoters and or for fighters that may be in a situation, and some of the reasons may be legitimate. The guy might have gotten a bad carton of milk, I don't know, but because there's lack of communication, there's lack of documentation, we don't really have any way to know that. So,
Is there any way that either can notify our executive director if there's reason to no show, if health reasons or other reasons?
yeah, I think that's kind of the track we want to go down. It's like, look, if you've got, if you got food poisoning, you go to the ER, send us documentation. If you got documentation, then that's legitimate.
And if it's not severe enough for you to actually seek, going to the ER or something like that, then you either need to show up and explain yourself after you fight and say you can't fight and why you can't fight, or you need to go to the ER.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing, we have a fight doctor at the event, he can determine if you are fit or not to
He can
compete.
give you an IV right there. If you're dehydrated, he can give you an IV right there.
You're not gonna fight if you're dehydrated.
Huh?
He's not
Yeah,
gonna
you
let you
can't
fight
do
if
that.
you're
No, you can't.
I know,
You
that's my
can't do
point.
that,
Oh.
Chairman.
That's my-
Chairman, you can't do that.
Oh.
I know, that's my point. That's my point. So, we'll add that for maybe, actually, let's not do it today, but maybe let's get through the hearings that we've got today, Matt, and then add that, no-show issue
Okay.
to the next meeting agenda, just to have a general discussion about, and maybe well, let's just add that to the agenda and start talking through that, cause like I said, I feel like it's becoming more and more common. And I don't want to become too severe as a commission on it, but at the same time, I think folks need to understand, you enter into a contract, you need to have a good reason if you're not gonna be there.
And I think we want to try to encourage as many promoters as we can to come to the next meeting to be part of this discussion as well.
I agree with
Because
that.
some of this falls on them, and maybe they have some ideas. And the matchmakers, I mean, if you're putting matches together and you're a promoter and you're putting matches together, you need to kind of know your people as well that you're putting on there.
That's right. That's right. All right, number 10, discussion with Zavir Jefferson in regards to his suspension. Matt, you know, give us a quick background. I think Zavir was here last month as well.
Yeah, this is a request from Mr. Jefferson as well as Mr. Owens to have this on the agenda to discuss. Back in June, we suspended his license indefinitely for his threatening acts towards the commission. He did come last month. It wasn't an official agenda item, so I believe Commissioner Thompson requested that we have it as an official item to discuss. So we have time to look at the facts and look at the notice of the final decision notice that we sent him. So he is here today. So if it's up to you, we can
Yeah,
bring
that's
him
fine. And if I remember correctly, I remember the communication issues. I don't remember what started. Was it a no-show or was it a missed weight? I can't remember.
It was a no-show to the weigh-ins.
That's right.
He
and
weighed
wanted to
in
late
later,
weigh in.
and then the next morning we decided that we were going to pull the fight, and then
That's
that's
right.
when it set everything in motion.
That's right. Okay. Well, David, Mr. Jefferson, I'll turn it over to you guys. If you have anything you want to offer, and then Rick, I think you were the one that suggested that we add it to the agenda. So maybe after let David go, and then I'll kick it to you and see if you have any comments or questions to get the discussion going.
Okay?
So I think this case started, and I'll let Xavier speak as well, with him. He had a night job at the time. He worked a couple overnights. He worked from whatever, midnight till 8 a.m. or something like that. And then he set his alarm for like 11 a.m. the next day because the weigh-in's at 1. He completely slept through his alarm, I believe. Contacted me after weigh-ins, and I told him if we get you weighed in before like 6 p.m. or 8 p.m. or something like that, you can still potentially fight. Or I said, still fight, I'm not sure which one. And met him out at LA Fitness, weighed him in, he made weight. I sent the video and photos to Matt Woodruff as we've done in the past. And told Xavier he made weight, he could fight. And then the commission later decided that that was not an adequate reason for missing weight, that you slept in. So then we had to relay to him that he could not fight that night, which was relayed to him the morning of the fight, that he could not fight. And he went off on Matt Woodruff on Facebook, and I think called him, left some voicemails. And you know, I will personally say about Xavier, he's fought for me a couple of times. I think once or twice he's taken a fight with 1 day notice when another fight dropped off. He went and got his blood and eye test, you know, that same day, the day of weigh-ins. I think that morning got it done. You know, he's a young kid. I think he's still finding his way in this sport. I think in the last couple of months that he hasn't been, you know, he's possibly been suspended or just hasn't been able to fight at all. You know, I've seen his attitude on Facebook change quite a bit. I've seen him change and become more positive. I don't know if that's real. I don't know if he's faking it. I'm not sure, but there's been a positive change in the last 60 days that I've seen from him. You know, so I'd like to see what he says and how he apologized to Matt and the commission. And, you know, I just think, in my opinion, I think he probably deserves, hopefully, a second chance.
Thank you, David. Mr. Jefferson?
Yes, you know, I apologize last time, but I'd like to apologize again. 'Cause I didn't sleep or anything, you know, I was being disrespectful, but, I was apologizing with the comments that I sent. I was apologizing for if it sounded threatening about what I was saying and stuff. That was basically it. Just apologizing.
Thank you. Rick, comments or questions from you?
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons we needed it on the agenda is because we can't take action unless it's actually and officially on the agenda. And, you know, I would be open to hearing what the other commissioners have to say on what we want to do, if anything. I appreciate him being here. I appreciate what he's saying. I appreciate that, you know, apparently his attitude may have improved. How long? When did we issue the suspension, Matt?
June 22nd.
So we're almost 2 months
Or
in on
June
suspension.
21st, I guess we had the meeting.
Yeah, so we're about 2 months
okay.
in.
All right, about 6 days. Okay.
Well, I recognize that he's been here for the last 2 meetings, and I certainly appreciate that. He came last time, didn't have to. It was not on the agenda. I recognize that every now and again, everybody loses their temper. Every now and again, everybody sleeps in, and in my mind, as we talked through the facts a few minutes ago, I'm now remembering the conversation that we had internally that weekend about how to respond to this, and it gets back to this question about procedure and professionalism. If we want to grow Georgia into a state where if we want to be a or the state for MMA, we've got to have habits and practices and attitudes and kind of a culture of professionalism about how we do this. When we made that decision, it certainly wasn't anything against you, Mr. Jefferson. I mean, we'd never met until last month. Certainly wasn't anything against David. We just felt like from a procedure standpoint, that was the right decision for us to make. At the same time, I think I want to make it clear that sort of communication, whether it's targeted at the commission or our staff or our promoters or anybody else, is not acceptable under any circumstances. And at some level, we need everybody in this industry to exercise a level of maturity and responsibility and self-control, even when you're frustrated by a situation. And I think that's the point, at least from my perspective, that needed to be made in this situation. That if we want to have an argument or a debate, you know, or a discussion about decisions relative to no-shows or missing weight or fight outcomes or whatever it is, that's fine. In a lot of respects, this is a business, and we're certainly willing to respond accordingly. But there is a level of professionalism that has to be maintained. As I said, I appreciate Mr. Jefferson being here last month and this month. I think we've made that point clear. And you know, depending on the will of the other commissioners, I'm certainly willing to you know, make some adjustments accordingly. Dr. Young, any thoughts or suggestions from you?
No. I concur.
And this is Reagan. You know, where we are is, fortunately for Mr. Jefferson, the commission did not revoke his license, but indefinitely suspended it so that he still has a license.
Mm-hmm.
The evidence that was put forward at the hearing would have warranted revocation of that license, but the commission did not take that step, but indefinitely suspended it. I think if we move forward from here, and I think Mr. Jefferson has made a start to get to where he needs to be, then I would, if the board has various options, one of which would be to do a public consent order that would lift the indefinite suspension and perhaps put his license on probation for the balance of the period that he holds it till it comes up for renewal. And that way his license could be on probation. It would still permit him to fight if he can get a fight. And it would lift the indefinite suspension on his license. So that's a possibility. I think, let's see. Yeah, I think that way, if the commission did something in that, towards that, if the commission is inclined to lift the suspension, we would need, I suggest, some documentation to that effect, and the public consent order would do that.
Okay. Any questions for Reagan and commissioners? Matt, do you have any thoughts or suggestions? You were kind of in the milieu on this one more than anybody, so I'll defer to your.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, a public consent order could be in place. It allows him to necessarily, you know, possibly come back to take a fight. If he does something again to the nature that he did in the past, obviously we have the authority right then to suspend the license again.
Without a public hearing?
Well, you could perhaps do a summary suspension of the license, but it would still entitle him to a hearing after that suspension.
Right, okay.
But that would at least, you know, allow him to potentially come back. You know, as David said, his mindset has changed on Facebook. I'm not friends with him on Facebook, so I don't know. I can't comment in terms of that aspect. But, you know, I think something to allow him possibly to come back would be good, but something in place that if he does something, the commission can instantly say, well, you did it again, and we're suspending you again. So maybe the way the public consent order could go is the route to take, because then it gives him the ability to fight, but it gives us the authority to say, look, if you mess up again, we're just going to suspend you again. And it's a kind of a win-win for both,
I suspect
guess.
it's probably not a reevaluation at that point, if we get back to that point. I'm comfortable with that, and I'll make that in the form of a motion, and then.
I'll second that.
So we've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? And the motion is to establish a public consent order that would allow Mr. Jefferson to come back on a probationary license, we'll call it, which would allow him to get back in and take another fight. And this would be for the duration of his current license. And then when his license is up for renewal, then that would give us the opportunity to evaluate and see where we are and decide if we want to go forward with a regular license.
And Mr. Chairman, I think it's we probably need to inquire of Mr. Jefferson if he's willing to sign such a consent order. I don't know why he wouldn't, but
Yeah,
before we draft it up.
That was my next question, I guess. Is that something you'd be willing to do?
Yes, I would.
Okay. He's agreed with that. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Reagan.
Because what happened is I would draft this consent order that we're talking about, public consent order. We need to get it, Matt, or I would need to get it to you. You'd have to read it, sign it, and get it back to Matt before it takes effect.
You guys think you can get it to David over this?
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Do you think?
Yeah, we can get it
Can we
today.
get it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we can give it to David.
Sure. We can do that, and then, but you will just have to sign off on it, have your signature notarized, and then get it back to Matt so that it can take effect.
Okay.
Because it doesn't take effect until it gets back to Matt.
Okay.
All right, so we've got a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, like sign. All right, good deal. Thanks again for being here. Appreciate it, David. All right, number 11, discussion with Eli Winter on suspension matter. Matt, once you get finished recording that action, you can kind of give us a quick backgrounder on this one.
Okay. This is another suspension hearing we had back in June, and at the June meeting, we suspended Mr. Winter's license for a period of 6 months. He was to pay the promoter $400, and he was to pay the commission $158.76. This was all in response to a no-show for Mr. Winter back at the January fight that David Oblis put on. They cited that he was injured but never provided the documentation to the commission showing an injury. So we brought it to the commission. We had the initial letter to appear that kind of similar to what we sent to Chris Arnold today. And I believe we had 2 public hearings scheduled. The first one was delayed due to Mr. Winter not showing, and I think a couple commissioners not being here. And then we had the hearing at the June meeting. He had 3 chances to appear before the board to discuss his no-show. So he's here today, or I believe his manager is here today, to discuss this case and if the board would consider reducing the suspension or something of that nature. So, or levying the fines, yes. So that's kind of what we have here, and I will turn it back over to you, Seth.
Okay. And this was an
So
NFC.
I have a question.
Hold.
I have a question. Is the individual there, or is his manager there?
He's not here, I'm here, I'm his trainer.
Okay, his trainer is here. Can you identify yourself?
James Penniman, I'm sorry, James Penniman.
That's right. Mr. Penniman is here and is Mr. Winter's trainer.
Mr. Winter's not there.
He is
Correct.
not, no.
Correct. And
Was the rest of- was-
wasn't. I'm sorry,
the fines
Rick.
paid?
Go ahead.
Were the fines paid?
They have not at this time,
Or
no.
not fines? Okay, all right, thanks.
And this was this an NFC show? This was an NFC show. Okay.
I don't remember.
It doesn't
was
matter.
back
I'm
in
just
January.
trying to keep straight who all needs to get a chance to talk.
Yes.
Rick, are you good? You have all your questions answered at the moment.
I did.
For now.
Dr. Young,
Yes, I'm here.
do you have any questions before we open it up for public comment?
No, I don't.
Okay. We'll go to Mr. Penniman next, I guess, is technically the petitioner at this point, and then David, and then we'll go back to having a discussion. And I will say, I received a letter this morning. I assume this is from you?
Yes, sir, yes, sir.
Okay.
We got that about 6:30 this morning.
We got a letter from Mr. Penniman this morning about 6:30, requesting consideration of the suspension and judgment. Outlines some facts I think that we've already basically been given. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Penniman for a few minutes, and then we'll go forward from there.
Yes, as well as the email that I sent you gentlemen this morning, I also printed off, if you see in the email, it says, in the letter it says that we have documentation, because looking at the decision, it says that Eli was suspended due to not giving a justifiable reason. And so what I have printed off is actually email correspondence between me and Mr. Woodruff, as well as Facebook Messenger from Dave Davis. And you can see that not only did Alliance MMA and Dave Oblis at least know about the injury, but they even acknowledged it on a couple of occasions. So when we were looking over the decision in section of the facts and findings, in the section 7, it says that respondent failed to appear for the mandatory weigh-ins on January 26th. No justifiable reason was given. If you will look at the information that I printed out, you can see that actually on January 26th at 12:47 p.m. I'm sorry.
Let me interrupt.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Are you attempting to retry this case for some reason, even though we had a public hearing and no one showed up?
Well, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure that this is a good use of the commission's time where we had all these opportunities to do exactly what this gentleman is trying to do currently. We already went through this process.
I don't disagree.
I was told by email that we didn't have to appear. It was up to us if we appeared. I have
It
that
was
email
up
as
to
well.
you if you
That
appeared.
is how I worded it.
You chose not to.
We sent the letter saying that there was going to be a public hearing on the license.
Mhm.
You did not have to attend, but if you didn't, the commission could take action against the license if you didn't attend. And I have that in an email as well.
And we also sent information, let you guys know that he was injured, and we also have the, Dr. Headley. I attempted to give Matthew Woodruff Dr. Headley's information. You said you didn't need it.
You're right, and I asked you on multiple occasions if you could send me the information because you had it, and you believe you said that there wasn't a note given.
All that I had was that imaging request that is at the back of that last sheet. That's all I could get from Eli, because when he went to go see the Dr. Headley didn't write him a doctor's note. All he had was that imaging request is that last sheet of paper.
I never got that. That was never sent to me. That's amazing.
Right, that's what I'm saying. I had to retrieve that imaging request from Elijah, but what I did have was the doctor's information. So any questions about his injury could have been answered by the doctor. I said in the email, the doctor could answer any questions that I could not answer, because all he told me was that it was tendonitis in his wrist. So that's all I could answer. So I said, here's the doctor's information. You can contact the doctor. He can answer all your questions that would verify that Elijah was hurt and could not fight. And I feel that we attempted to give you guys a justifiable reason, and then we also have numerous emails from Dave acknowledging the injury and then trying to get us to reschedule the fight, and saying that if we would reschedule the fight, then he would suggest that the commission not suspend Elijah's license.
And I appreciate all that, sir. I appreciate all that, but my only question is, why didn't you come to the hearing if it was so important? And I'm only one commissioner, but I don't have the wherewithal to continue down this road, Mr. Chairman. We had a public hearing and no one decided to show.
I tend to agree with that, Mr. Spinnerman. I mean, I'm sympathetic with the situation. The time to have had this conversation would have been when we had the public hearing.
He wasn't able to attend.
Well,
Okay.
I mean, we just went through this with Mr. Jefferson, who, on the contrary, has been twice, of his own volition. He didn't have to come
Yes,
last
sir.
month, and he showed up.
Yes, sir.
I don't know what to tell you. We're bound by certain rules and statutes and things, and actions that we feel like we need to take on behalf of the industry. We
Yes,
went
sir.
through a process. There was a notification.
Yes, sir.
We didn't even get notification, hey, I can't be there. Would you be willing to continue the hearing? We got none of that. We still don't have documentation of this alleged injury. So I think. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It says it on that on the last very sheet of paper that I printed off. It is the imaging request from Dr. Chris Headley. I mean, it has his medical information on there, his number.
So this is the first we're seeing.
This is the
was
first
never
we're
sent
seeing,
to
yeah.
me, and I asked multiple times for it. So this is the first that the commission is seeing a notice.
Because I had to receive it from Eli. I didn't have.
When did you get that from Eli?
I'd have to look in my text messages. He sent me a picture of it because he had to go to the doctor's office. But what I'm saying is back on May when I reached out to you, I said that I could give you the doctor's information and he could answer these questions.
We're not going to call the doctor for you. That's not our job.
Even though you guys are trying to verify if he was hurt or not.
This is not our job. The verification of injury would have been at the public hearing where you bring this information to us.
I didn't have that
And
information. Sir.
And it's important that the fighter himself, the person being suspended, demonstrates, at least to me, that he wants us to consider certain things. I mean, he hasn't even shown or communicated with the commission that I know of, except through a trainer. And I mean, if people don't care enough to show up for their own license, then again, Mr. Chairman, I say we move on.
I don't disagree. I mean, when is Elijah's license up for renewal? You know that off the top of our head.
Should be like September. His last fight was in September.
But I know that it would be 6 months. For when we ordered it was 6 months from June, which puts it into December.
Which is meant January 1st.
And he'd have to pay the $400 of the promoter and the $158 to us to have the suspension fully lifted. So that was what was ordered. I'd have to pull the actual license to see the date. I don't know off the top of my head.
Any other comments or questions? I will, I will just kind of close this out by saying, you can't send us a letter the morning of 3 months after, and just expect us to willy-nilly make a change to a decision that we've made after multiple public notices. It's just not, it's not reasonable. And I would also advise you, some of the wording in the last paragraph of this is a little offensive to me, as a member of the commission.
I mean, we have text messages to prove. I understand it's very insinuatory, the comments, but I mean, I have text messages, not Instagram, but Facebook messages from Dave Oblis, and he also CC'd Matt Woodruff in it, saying that, hey, look, if you'll take this rescheduled fight, depending on if your injury is healed by then. It says it right there. So
he's not a member of the commission.
But I'm saying he said that we didn't give him a reason. We did give him a reason. Dave Oblis said the commission knew that night. I have the message right from Dave Oblis saying the commission knew that night.
We did not have documentation of an injury. And this kind of goes, hang on just a second, David, this goes back to the discussion we had a while ago about this whole no-show, missing weigh-ins, all this kind of stuff. I do think this is more evidence that we need to look at and probably tighten up our policy and how we deal with these type of situations, and I'll
Yes,
grant
sir.
you that. But at the same time, I think we're past the facts of what happened that weekend in January, or whenever it was. What we're talking about now is process, established processes where we've given opportunities to have this very conversation about the facts of the case. You guys not here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You know, we've got a situation where, you know, missed a fight, no show. This is not some sort of egregious offense. This
No.
is not a, so what I want you to hear is, please be respectful of the processes and procedures that this commission has set up so that we don't get into these situations.
Agreed.
You know, I think if we see some progress or some willingness from the fighter himself, no offense to you, that this is a matter of importance through either showing up or paying the fine or something like that, then we may have a conversation. But right now, I think we're where we are. So I appreciate you being here today, and so I think we're just going to leave it at that. Number 12, we've got a discussion on the Senate Study Committee on Combat Sports. I was telling Matt before we started the meeting, I actually talked to Senator Beach yesterday, and it just occurred to me, David, I think you wanted to say something on number 11, and I didn't recognize you. Are you good?
It's ended. If it comes back one day, I'll speak, but
Okay.
I don't think I
Thank
can
you.
add anything.
I appreciate that. I talked to Senator Beach yesterday. He let me know, I think the Lieutenant Governor's office has appointed members of the study committee. He is going to send that to me as soon as possible, and then he's waiting on some ideas from us in terms of what we would like to see in content, discussion items there. I've got a list. I've been kind of thinking through. Matt's got some things that he's been working through, but what I'd like to do is try to get an outline memo to Senator Beach maybe by the end of next week. So I'll throw it open for some discussion today, but then I would also say, Matt, if you could just send out an email to members of the commission and let them know if they could email you ideas or suggestions to be included in a communication to Senator Beach by middle of next week, that'd be good, and then I'm happy to work with you on getting that put together and send it in.
Mr. Chairman, do you want to, it may be beneficial if you already have an outline started so the commission members aren't duplicating your work.
Yep.
If you don't mind sharing yours.
Happy to do that.
Initially.
Yep,
That'd be great.
happy to do that.
Thank you.
And I'll just note, we can send that around and have some dialogue by email that will be subject to open records, so just as an FYI to everybody on that one.
And we're not voting on anything, so it's not a meeting.
No, we're not, and I think Senator Beach did this at our request, I think he'd be the first one to admit he's not an expert on the industry, so I think he's gonna rely heavily on the commission to provide direction. And obviously, we've talked about two primary things, one being fighter safety, and two, well, I'd say three things. One, fighter safety generally, things like updating our physical form. Two, just ways we can grow the sport generally, and we've had a conversation with the Department of Economic Development about that, and what can we do as a state to better position ourselves to grow the sport. And then three, obviously, we've got some organizations that are operating out there outside our guidelines, and we want to look at some ways to address that. And then there's been some subheadings that have come up over the last year or so that I like, this no-show policy and things like that. So all of those things I think need to be on the table, and to the extent that we can be more detailed on the front end with Senator Beach, I think the better off we'll be. He's excited about it, and he's willing to jump in with both feet, and I think we need to do everything we can to work with him on that. So I'll send an email around about that, and then we can make notes and go forward from there. And then I may end up asking for there to be a subcommittee that'll work, a subcommittee of our commission that'll work with the study committee. The other thing that we may want to do that I know is an issue, and this might be a Reagan-Don conversation, is addressing the rules and the statute specifically. And Reagan, there may be things that you've noticed over the last year or so that have come up in meetings that need to be addressed and tweaked.
Right. Yeah, right.
So I think that's something that we'll want to talk about as well. The other thing that I want to do, and I haven't been involved in a lot of these study committees in the past, on a variety of different subjects. I think we want to make sure that folks in the industry have an opportunity to make their voice heard. So I may make the recommendation, I think we ought to make the recommendation that we have some open mic sessions where we get some promoters and trainers and fighters in, just to basically ask the question, hey, how can we make the sport, how can we make the industry better? And that would be the opportunity for people like Chief Cooper to come and talk about what's going on in their community. You know, promoters to talk about no-show policies, fighters to talk about, you know, whatever issues are all kind of on their mind. So I do think that's something that we ought to have as well.
When would that be?
We'll know. It'll be over the course of the fall. So it'll be probably between, I would say, realistically, you're probably looking at 4 to 6 meetings, maybe 4 or 5 meetings that'll take place between probably September 15th and the end of the year. All right, anything else on number 12? All right, I'll get this outline out to everybody. Final item on the agenda, discussion on the fight outcome from July 21st, 2018. I have no idea what this is, so I'm gonna kick it to Matt.
Yeah, we got the video, excuse me, yesterday. There was a fight that took place down in Macon, July 21st, and an accidental headbutt ended the fight in the second round. The fight was on the scorecards listed as a TKO. However, under the unified rules, if an accidental foul occurs, an injury severe enough to where the referee stops the bout, the bout will result in a no decision if stopped before 4 completed rounds. Obviously, this was in the second round, so based off the unified rules, the fight should be deemed a no contest because of an accidental foul. So before we change it, I just want to let the board know we were going to be changing a fight outcome because it was mislabeled based off the unified rules. I spoke with the official, the chief official, as well as reviewed video to make sure everything was in compliance, and everyone agrees that it was an accidental foul. There was some confusion, I guess, night of that they just said it was a TKO. However, that's not correct.
Do we need to vote on that?
We will check the boxes, but it's one of those that, based off the unified rules of boxing, it needs to be listed as a no contest. Okay. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to change that result today.
I think we should just vote on it and get it in the minutes, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
In case anybody comes back later. So I'll make the motion
got a motion, do we have a
Change.
second?
This is Reagan, is there something though that we might wanna, do we need to ask for any input from anyone else? Do you think?
If Matt met with the officials and it's in the unified rules and they all looked at the video and.
I talked to both coaches as well.
I was about to
Everyone
say,
was involved in this
yeah.
discussion yesterday and the past couple of days about this. You know, like I said, the big thing we were waiting on was a video of it. That's what we got. We sent it out to the officials. They all agreed. And then the two coaches I talked to separately, they're both okay with that because, I mean, obviously the unified rules state that's what the outcome should be.
Alrighty, we got a motion, do we have a second? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Cool. Alright, public comment, I think we've heard from everybody.
Actually, I do have one